Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my very first attempt at participating in the BookTube Spin. This is BookTube Spin number 5. The whole big BookTube Spin idea was the brainchild of Rick McDonnell. I'll leave a link to his latest announcement video announcing BookTube Spin 5 in the show notes down below. But the idea is that he has this wheel, I think, and he spins it. It has 20 numbers, 1 to 20, and whatever number it lands on, you read the book that you've chosen that corresponds with that number. So what we do, again, this is my first time, but what we are supposed to do as creators or as people in the comments section or whatever is make a list of 20 books. I've done that. I've numbered them all with, really awesome little sticky notes, and so I'm going to talk about those books really quickly and kind of talk about why I'm doing the BookTube Spin this time. So I didn't make a TBR for January, and that's because in January I really just like to kind of just read without any kind of purpose, direction, complete mood reading, just, whatever comes up I'm going to read. And one of the things I noticed this month is I was reading a lot of books I've had on my shelves for a while. So I thought this BookTube Spin idea, which is a great idea, would be a really good way for me to kind of read some books that have been on my shelf, to provide that extra motivation to read books I've had for some time. Some of these are books I've tried to read and failed. Some of these are books that I've had for a really long time. I won't even can't even begin to tell you how long for some of them, and then get those books read. So without any further ado, my 20 books. Book number 1, and I had to label them with a sticky note because making an actual list would be a lot more work. Anyway, book number 1 on my list is Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco. Yeah, I tried to read this book 2 or 3 times. The last time I got to page 144, that's where my bookmark is, and I gave up. I don't doubt it's the greatness of the book or anything like that, but I just have a difficult time staying stuck in with the book and the story. My interest level seems to wane from time to time, and it just it has in the past become difficult for me to continue on. So if one of the 2 spins that Rick's going to do comes up as number 1, I will try to read Foucault's Pendulum sometime in the next, I think it's 2 months, or actually 2.5 months. Book number 2 on my list is Future Home of Living God by Louise Erdrich. This is the only Louise Erdrich book I have and have had on my shelf for a while that I haven't read, so I made that number 2. Ultimately it's my desire to have read all of Louise Erdrich's novels, and this will help me along that way, and for whatever reason this is the book that I've resisted reading of hers the most. I've bought other of her novels while this one's sitting on my shelf, but this would be good kind of impetus if it comes up in the spin to read that one. Book number 3 is The Public Burning by Robert Coover. I bought this book as a result of a thing I did with Mark Nash, BookTuber, where we did like this version of Sean the Bookmaniac's 112-page challenge, where we each chose some books and then shared page 112 of those books, and then we made videos talking about which of those books we'd like to read the most. And for me in that challenge, that book was The Public Burning by Robert Coover. For all kinds of different reasons, it has just never been the book that I picked up to read, in part maybe because it's about 530 pages long, but I thought this would be a good way to motivate me to read that. Probably one of the books I've had the longest, and not that you could tell from this really yellow mass market paperback cover. One of the books I had the longest is 3 novels by Samuel Beckett. I've read Malloy, but I don't know if you know anything about Malloy. It's not the most uplifting of stories, and Beckett is not oftentimes, even though he's funny, oftentimes his stories are somewhat, I think, are a little dark and grim. So if the number 4 comes up on one of the 2 spins for the BookTube Spin, I will read Malone Dies, which is the second novel in this book. Number 5, one of the things I did with my list is I tried to kind of alternate short and long books, so I didn't have a whole lot of long books. I tried to alternate books, that maybe had been on my shelf for a long time, but sometimes not. And I gave myself a few treats, that I put on the list, or books that I would definitely look forward to reading at some time soon anyway. And this is an example of that. My book number 5 is The Memoirs of 2 Young Wives by Honore de Balzac. If you watch my channel any at all, you know that Balzac is one of my favorite novelists. And so getting to read one of his novels would be great. And, getting an excuse to move it to the top of the list of books for me to read would also be great. So it's number 5. Number 6, another book I've had for a really long period of time. Again, you can tell from what it looks like. I think I actually lifted this book from my mother's bookshelves at some point, some time ago. That's Death in Venice by Thomas Mann. I've been intending to read this for a long time. Mann is a writer I've never read before, so that's my number 6. Number 7 is another book I've had for a really long time, and that's A Passage to India by E.M. Forster. I've read Maurice. I've read Howard's End, Room with a View, and I would like to read this E.M. Forster novel. For some reason, it's just been on my shelf for a long time. I never get around to it, but it's on my list now. Oh, was that number 7? Yes, that's book number 7. Book number 8 is a book that was a really popular, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago now, and that is Snow Falling on Cedars by David Guterson. It's made into a movie. I've never seen the movie all the way through, and I've never read the book. So again, in an effort to, provide me some motivation to read books I've had for a long time, I put Snow Falling on Cedars on my list. Again, one of my newer books that I put on the list, but a book that isn't particularly new, is The Lacuna by Barbara Kingsolver. I loved Poisonwood Bible, and for some reason I've never read a single other one of Barbara Kingsolver's novels, and from watching BookTube and getting a lot of recommendations from other people, this is one that people tell me they think that I will like, so I put that on my list. I got a copy at a half-price books, and it's going to go on my list. Book number 10, another book I've had, just like a broken record, another book I've had for a long time, Fortress of Solitude by Jonathan Lethem. Not exactly sure where his career stands now or what he's done with it. I don't really know very much about him, but I bought this book a long time ago when he seemed like he was kind of the new writer, perhaps. I understand it kind of blends kind of comic book pop culture stuff with it, and that oftentimes, or pop culture stuff, comic books, other things, that oftentimes is something I really like. So I put that on my list so I could maybe move that one. Probably one of the single strangest books on my list that I've never read any of is this collection of 3 novels by James T. Farrell. They are the Studs Lonergan trilogy. So the first one is Young Lonergan. I bought this collection because at a time about 20, 25 years ago, I kind of thought I would read a lot of what I'm just going to call proletarian fiction. Popular fiction written in the United States in the 1930s and 20s and 30s and afterwards, which kind of centered on the authors challenging capitalism and exposing the problems of capitalism. I believe that's what the Studs Lonergan trilogy does, if memory serves. I've had this book for some time, and I've never even attempted to read one of those novels, so it is number 11 on my list. Number 12 is a book I've had so long ago that I bought it as a part when I used to be a part of the Book of the Month Club, and that is A Clearing in the Distance. It is a biography of the landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted, who is responsible for the planning and creation of a number of important city parks. I won't tell. I think the author's name is Wytold Rybczynski, maybe. And I've had, this is a book I intended to read. It was back when I first had started teaching and was beginning to think about teaching college classes, and I wanted to read as wide as I could in American history. With, one of the things about teaching American history is I think oftentimes one of the things that benefits you is you have really deep pockets of knowledge, and one of the things I was interested in were cities and social class issues that existed in cities in 19th century America, and so this seemed like a book that would help me learn a lot about that. I also have this biography of Benjamin Franklin, The First American by W.H. Brands. It's number 13 on my list. I've read other Franklin biographies, his autobiographies, shorter biographies. Never one this long. This is, again, there's some really long, chunky books on my list. This will be one of the long ones, but H.W. Brands is widely regarded as a very readable historian who is a good writer. And so, at one point I want to get to this, and again, the spin would help me get there really quickly. Along those same lines, I bought the book Six Frigates by Ian W. Toll. I bought this in part because of what I explained about teaching American history and my desire to have a deeper knowledge, but also because I had begun reading the Aubrey Maturin novels by Patrick O'Brian, and had this real kind of all of a sudden real interest in kind of 19th century naval warfare, and so I thought this book sounded ideal, and I bought it, and I think I tried to read the first chapter, and for whatever reason it didn't appeal to me at that time, and I moved on. Book 15 is one of my kind of treats. It's a short one. It's definitely a book I was going to read anyway, hopefully sometime soon, and that's The Silence in the Garden by William Trevor. It's a short novel by Trevor. Again, if you watch my channel, you know William Trevor is one of my favorite writers. I've had this book for a really long time. I think I've said that at least 75 times now, and this would give me a good reason to pick it up and read it. Say the exact same thing, but I won't say that phrase again, about All the Names by Jose Saramago. Whenever this book was published in an English translation, that's when I got it. So let me see how long have I had this book without reading it. This book was copyrighted in English translation in 1999, which means I've had this book now for 23 years. Never read it. Back when I first got on BookTube and started doing Black History Month reading, one of the popular titles a couple years ago was The Last Thing You Surrendered by Leonard Pitts, and I really wanted to read it, and so I bought a copy, but then other books for Black History Month and other books pushed this book off my list of books to read, so I thought putting it on the BookTube Spin list would be a good way to get to it, perhaps. Last year, Hamnet was one of the books that was all the rage here on BookTube. I believe it won the BookTube Prize for Fiction. And Kelly over at Books I'm Not Reading had somehow acquired 2 copies and offered to give a copy, or send a copy of Hamnet, one or extra copies of Hamnet to whoever asked for it. I asked, and she sent it to me very kindly, and so I put that book on the list. I think on one of the questions in one of those my end of the year book tag question was, what book do you regret not reading? And I said Hamnet. And then another book that I, kind of inspired by my reading lately. This month I've already read The Children of Men by P.D. James. And this is a P.D. James mystery novel that does not involve her most famous detective, Adam Dalgliesh. I'm not sure there is a recurring detective who appears in this novel, but I've had this for a long time, and this would be a good reason to read it. And then finally, getting back to 19th century French literature, I've had The Belly of Paris by Émile Zola for many years, and have always meant to get to it. I've read only one Zola novel, and that was Germinal, which I liked a lot. And so a lot of these books are books where sometimes I read a book by an author and I really liked that book, but for whatever reason I never just went back and read anything else by them. So I'm really looking forward to the BookTube Spin, which I believe is taking place on January the 14th, and letting the wheel choose my read for me. There's something kind of feels like gambling about that, so we'll see. And hopefully it doesn't pick 2 really long books, but now that I'm looking at it, I probably have already shot myself in the foot here with this challenge, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, there you go. If you know anything about these books, have any thoughts about these books, or anything I've said, please leave a comment in the comment section down below. And as always, thank you for watching.